When you're over 60, life begins a new chapter where clarity, purpose, and impact take center stage. And it's in this phase that the universe, or God, starts refining your circle, your energy, and your role not as a conclusion, but as a deeper calling keynote night. When you're over 60, life begins a new chapter where clarity, purpose, and impact take center stage. And it's in this phase that the universe or God starts refining your circle, your energy, and your role, not as a conclusion, but as a deeper calling. When you're over 60, life doesn't slow down, it refocuses. It becomes clearer, more distilled, more aligned with what truly matters. And in this clarity, something divine, something intentional begins to take place. There is a natural and often spiritual process of separation that begins. It's not always loud, it's not always dramatic, but it is very real. And it's one of the most important shifts you'll experience in your lifetime. You may start noticing that certain people are no longer as present in your life. Conversations feel more filtered. Invitations stop coming as frequently. People who once called every week now check in only occasionally. At first, this might feel like rejection. It might feel like life is moving on without you. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is that life, or God, or the deeper rhythm of the universe is simplifying your environment so that you can focus on what is essential. At 60 and beyond, you're not being excluded. You're being chosen for something different. This phase of life is not about growing wider, it's about growing deeper. The earlier parts of our lives are filled with expansion, more friends, more responsibilities, more goals, more movement. We are taught to build, to reach, to hustle. But as we age, and especially past 60, we begin to see that not all of that more actually served us. Much of it was noise, clutter, or distraction. This new chapter is about shedding the non-essential to find the meaningful. It's about realizing that your value is not in how busy you are or how many people surround you, but in how well you use the time, energy, and wisdom you've gained. The process of separation is not random. It's purposeful. People leave because they've played their part in your story, and you in theirs. Places become unfamiliar because your spirit no longer aligns with them. Activities you once enjoyed may start to feel empty. You may even start questioning things you've done for decades. That's not confusion. That's clarity. It's your soul telling you that you are transitioning from activity to alignment, from doing to being, from chasing to contributing. At 60, you've earned the right to live with intention. You've earned the ability to say no without guilt, to embrace solitude without loneliness, and to speak truth without fear. And in doing so, the separation becomes not a loss, but a gain. You gain space to reflect. You gain time to focus on what actually energizes you. You gain the presence of mind to mentor, to guide, to teach. Your influence no longer needs to be loud or public. It just needs to be authentic and intentional. One of the biggest shifts in this stage of life is moving from success to significance. When you were younger, success might have meant promotions, achievements, wealth, or recognition. But significance, true significance, means impact, legacy, and contribution. It means being remembered not for what you had, but for what you gave. And to reach that level of living, the separation must happen. The pruning must take place. You can't carry everyone and everything with you into this next chapter. You weren't meant to so when you feel alone or feel like your circle is shrinking. Remind yourself the most sacred work often happens in the quiet, not the crowd. The deepest influence is felt not in rooms filled with applause, but in the life of one person who needed your story, your example, your wisdom. You are not less valuable at this stage. You are more distilled, more focused, more capable of seeing what others cannot yet see. This season is not a retreat, it's a refinement. It's a preparation for impact on a different scale. Because when you're over 60, you're not being forgotten. You're being entrusted. Entrusted with the final chapters of your story, chapters that have the potential to be the most powerful of all. You are being positioned for influence, not popularity, for depth, not distraction, for legacy, not visibility. These words are not just poetic, they reflect a critical shift in purpose that begins when you move into the later stages of life. After 60, something begins to change, and it's not just physical or social, it's deeply spiritual and psychological. You're no longer called to be everywhere, please everyone, or chase every opportunity. Instead, you're called to become more focused, more intentional, and more grounded in your purpose. Think of your earlier years as a time of exploration. You tested your limits. You expanded your world. You learned how to navigate relationships, careers, challenges, and ambitions. You collected knowledge and experiences. You were busy building, but now the energy of your life shifts. It becomes less about expansion and more about expression. Not expression to impress others, but to impart meaning, to give something back, to shape a legacy that outlives your presence. Influence in this context isn't about being in the spotlight. It's not about how many followers you have or whether people know your name. It's about the quiet strength you carry, the lessons you've learned that others are desperate for. Influence means that your words now carry weight, not because they're loud, but because they are rooted in experience. Influence means that you don't need to demand attention because your presence commands respect. You've lived, you've overcome, and now people look to you not for novelty, but for truth. This is why distractions begin to fade. Certain people, situations, and responsibilities may begin to dissolve or lose their appeal. The need to be liked loses its hold. The desire to be seen gives way to the desire to be understood. Because at this stage, you realize how precious your time is and how powerful your presence can be when directed with purpose. You start asking different questions. Not, what can I gain from this? But, is this aligned with who I've become? You stop chasing trends and start trusting your intuition. And that internal compass becomes stronger the more you listen. You're also being prepared for depth. Shallow conversations no longer satisfy you. Surface-level relationships feel exhausting. You crave substance. Moments and people who see the real you, who want to grow, reflect, and contribute. You begin to recognize the value of your story, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. The depth you now seek is not a rejection of the world, it's a return to your true self. Legacy, too, becomes a calling. It's no longer about how much you can do in a day. It's about what you're leaving behind, not just materially, but emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually. What wisdom are you passing on? What values are you instilling? What stories will be told because you lived them? This is the season of impact. And impact is never measured by noise. It's measured by meaning. Visibility, which once might have driven you, now feels secondary. You don't need to prove yourself anymore. You've already shown up in countless ways for countless people. And now it's about using your influence to elevate others, to mentor, to guide, to support. Whether in your family, your community, or quietly behind the scenes, you become a force for stability, truth, and direction. So when God begins to separate you from certain environments or people, don't resist it. It's not rejection, it's redirection. You're not being made invisible. You're being made invaluable. The distractions are being stripped away so that you can operate with clarity. The noise is quieting so that your influence can speak more clearly, and your life, refined by years, by experiences, by transformation, is becoming a message that others need to hear. You're not winding down, you're being lifted up for something deeper, more lasting, and profoundly significant. You are being set apart. That phrase carries a weight many don't immediately recognize, especially when they find themselves in a season of change, distance, or quiet after turning 60. At first, it can feel like isolation. Friends are fewer. The phone doesn't ring as often, and the pace of life slows to a more reflective rhythm. But this isn't abandonment. It's not a decline. It's a transition into something more intentional. You are being set apart, not pushed aside, and that distinction is everything. To be set apart means that you are no longer meant to be in the crowd for the sake of being in it. It means you're being removed from environments and dynamics that once consumed your energy but no longer align with who you've become. At this stage in life, what used to be important starts to lose its grip. Recognition, approval, endless productivity, these things start to feel hollow. And in their place, clarity begins to surface. You begin to feel drawn toward what matters deeply: peace, wisdom, legacy, and contribution. There is a sacredness to this process. It's like life is clearing the clutter around you, not to diminish your experience, but to elevate your focus. When you were younger, your path was crowded. You had to push through competing voices, obligations, and expectations. Now your path is being made clearer, not because the journey is over, but because the destination has shifted. You are not meant to keep running at the same pace. You're meant to walk with purpose, speak with conviction, and live with alignment. Being set apart doesn't mean being lonely. It means being in alignment with your deeper assignment. You may find yourself spending more time in reflection. You might be drawn to nature, stillness, or intentional conversation. You might notice that certain people in your life are no longer on the same path, and that's okay. When God, or the guiding force in your life, sets you apart, it's never random. It's because you've reached a stage where your presence is meant to influence rather than impress, to mentor rather than compete, to guide rather than chase. The wisdom you carry now is not only a gift, it's a responsibility. You've survived storms that others are just beginning to encounter. You've seen cycles repeat, relationships evolve, and time reshape priorities. That experience cannot be wasted. When you're set apart, it's because you're needed in a different role. You're no longer called to be in the middle of every conversation or in the center of every decision. Instead, you're called to be a stabilizing force, a wise presence, a grounding voice. And that requires a new level of inner stillness and strength. Often, being set apart means saying no more often. It means being okay with solitude, with less noise and fewer distractions. It means protecting your peace so that you can pour into the things that truly matter. This is a time for you to invest in people who are hungry to grow, in causes that reflect your values, in actions that align with your purpose. And most of all, to finally give yourself permission to live fully in your truth. You've spent decades becoming who you are. This season is not a detour or a decline. It's a commissioning. It's a sacred chapter where you are no longer trying to prove your worth. You are simply expressing it. You don't need to fight for space in the world. You've earned it. Now you choose how to use it. So when you feel the world pulling back, don't panic. Lean in. You are being set apart for a reason. The silence isn't emptiness, it's clarity. The distance isn't punishment, it's preparation. You are not forgotten. You are being entrusted with something only a life like yours could carry. And now more than ever, the world needs what only you can give. This is the season of purposeful pruning. At first glance, the word pruning might seem harsh, even painful. It implies cutting away, removing, or letting go of parts that once seemed vital. But in the natural world, pruning is not destruction, it's cultivation. It's the intentional removal of what no longer serves growth so that the plant can thrive more fully. And in the same way, when you reach the later years of your life, especially after 60, pruning becomes a purposeful. Pruning means you begin to recognize what has served its season. Certain habits, routines, and even relationships may have played a role in your development, but they're no longer aligned with the direction your soul is headed. This isn't about bitterness or blame. It's about recognizing the rhythm of life. Not everything is meant to go with you into your next chapter. Some things were only meant to teach you, challenge you, or carry you through a particular stage. What makes pruning purposeful is that it's not random or chaotic. It's precise. It's guided. You start to feel it in your intuition before you even act on it. Maybe you've outgrown certain conversations that once fascinated you. Maybe you feel a strong pull toward simplicity, away from the noise of obligation. Maybe your energy is no longer scattered in 10 directions, but focused toward things that give you peace and joy. That's pruning in action. Life begins removing the excess, and in doing so, reveals what truly matters. There's a kind of sacred wisdom in learning to let go without resistance. Many people cling tightly to everything they've accumulated, relationships, roles, status, activities, because they fear that letting go is the same as losing value. But when you understand purposeful pruning, you realize that letting go is actually a sign of maturity. You don't have to hold on to everything to prove your worth. You've already proven it simply by how much you've grown, endured, and learned. Now, the question becomes, what needs to be trimmed so that I can fully bloom the garden? Unpruned plants may still grow, but often they grow in the wrong directions. They become tangled, burdened with dead branches, or too heavy to support themselves. The same can happen to us if we resist the pruning that life naturally brings. We become emotionally entangled in obligations that drain us. We carry past wounds like dead branches that block the light of the present. We stretch ourselves too thin trying to maintain what no longer serves us. But with intentional pruning, we free ourselves from what's holding us back. This process also invites a deeper level of trust. Trust that life, or God, knows what needs to be removed. Trust that what's taken away isn't meant to harm you, but to heal you. Trust that the quieter, simpler, more focused life you are being led into is not lesser, but greater. Not less full, but more aligned. It's easy to fear change when it feels like loss. But what if it's not loss? What if it's refinement? There's also a profound peace that begins to emerge as the pruning continues. As distractions fade, space opens up. Space for reflection, for rest, for deeper relationships. You begin to notice beauty in the small moments. You become more present. You listen more. Speak less, and when you do speak, your words carry depth. You're no longer driven by urgency, but by intentionality. Purposeful pruning is preparation. It prepares you to step fully into your wisdom, your mentorship, your legacy. It prepares you to be less busy and more present. It shapes you into someone who doesn't just survive, but deeply understands and enriches the lives of others. You were never meant to hold everything forever. You were meant to hold what matters most, and this season is helping you find exactly what that is. This stage of life asks different questions of you. In your younger years, the questions were centered around growth, ambition, and proving yourself. What can I achieve? How far can I go? Who do I need to become to succeed? These questions are necessary at certain stages of development. They push us, shape us, and build the foundation for what comes later. But after the age of 60, the questions shift. They go deeper. They move from outward performance to inward reflection. They are not about what you can do, but about what truly matters now. You begin to ask yourself, what will I leave behind that lasts? This is the beginning of legacy thinking. Legacy is not about money or fame. It's about impact. It's about the values you've lived by, the people you've influenced, and the wisdom you passed down. At this stage, you realize that things fade, but character endures. You start to think more about how you made people feel, how you helped them grow, how you showed up when it counted. Your life begins to orient around significance, not status. You also begin to ask, who truly needs what I've learned? That question shifts you from self-focus to service. Over the years, you've gained insights from mistakes, victories, and everything in between. You've watched cycles repeat in relationships, in careers, in family life. Those lessons weren't just for you. They're meant to be shared. This stage of life invites you to become a mentor, a guide, a truth teller. You have something to offer that books and videos can't replicate: lived experience. The people who need your wisdom aren't always the ones who ask for it out loud. But if you pay attention, you'll see that your story, your whole journey, can light the way for others. Another essential question arises: where can I still make a difference? This is about relevance, not in a worldly sense, but in a soulful one. You might not be in the same career or the same circles, but that doesn't mean you've stopped mattering. In fact, your influence might now be more focused and more potent. You don't have to be everywhere or do everything. You just have to show up where your presence brings truth, clarity, or peace, whether it's in your family, a community space, a conversation, or even in silence. Your difference is in how you show up, not how often or how loudly. This season is not about fading into the background. It's about becoming more precise in your purpose. You don't need to prove your worth anymore. You've already built a legacy in progress through how you've loved, led, and lived. Now, your role is to refine, to take what you've learned and ask, how can I use this for someone else's good? How can I turn my scars into lessons, my time into presence, and my experience into guidance? These deeper questions invite deeper living. They strip away the superficial and lead you to the core of who you are. They reveal what you've carried that you don't need anymore: resentment, perfectionism, guilt, or regret, and what you must carry forward: grace, wisdom, courage, and compassion. They help you see that the later years of life are not about doing less, but about living with more depth, more presence, and more alignment with your highest values. You start to feel less urgency to chase things and more desire to protect your peace. You say yes with intention and no with confidence. You invest in fewer things, but you give them your whole heart. And in that process, You discover a richness of life that was hidden during the business of earlier decades. These new questions don't signify an ending. They mark a new beginning, one rooted in meaning, impact, and truth. They guide you not into retirement, but into refinement. Not into silence, but into significance. And they remind you that the most important answers often come after we've lived enough to know what's truly worth asking. There's a grace in slowing down, and it's not the kind of slowing that implies weakness or decline. It's a slowing that brings clarity, intention, and presence. When you reach your 60s and beyond, life starts to feel less like a race and more like a walk with meaning. The urgency to keep up with everything fades, and in its place comes a deeper awareness of time, not in scarcity, but in sacredness. Every moment begins to carry more weight, every conversation more depth, and every choice more intention. You're no longer rushing to be everywhere or to please everyone. You begin to move at the speed of wisdom. This slowing is not about doing less. It's about doing what matters most. You begin to realize how much of your earlier life was spent filling time, chasing validation, or meeting external expectations. Now you crave substance. You don't need 20 acquaintances to feel fulfilled. You need one conversation that stirs the soul. You don't seek entertainment for distraction. You seek experiences that align with who you are. Slowing down allows you to observe, to reflect, and most importantly, to live fully in the present instead of constantly looking ahead or looking back. This kind of pace opens up space for listening, not just to others, but to yourself and to God. You begin to hear things that the noise of business once drowned out. You start noticing the quiet voice of purpose that has always been there, but often ignored. You notice how your body feels, how your heart responds, and how your spirit rests. Slowing down makes room for discernment. It helps you choose your words more carefully, your relationships more wisely, and your commitments more purposefully. There is also emotional healing that comes in this rhythm. When you slow down, you have time to process what you've been carrying for years. Hurts, regrets, unresolved grief. The hurried life doesn't give space for healing, but this slower pace does. And healing isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as forgiving yourself, letting go of old expectations, or finally understanding the why behind certain experiences. This is grace in action, not fixing everything, but allowing yourself to be whole even in the presence of imperfection. People might misinterpret this stage as becoming passive or irrelevant, but in truth, it's the opposite. You are stepping into a more refined version of yourself. You are no longer reactive, you are responsive. You're not impulsive, you're intentional. And this intentional living is a quiet power. It's the power to say, I don't need to rush. I know who I am. It's the wisdom to choose stillness over noise, depth over speed, and impact over impression. Slowing down also makes room for others. It allows you to be present for your grandchildren, your community, your friends. When you're not consumed by performance or production, you have the time to show up fully, to listen, to mentor, to support. You no longer need to compete for attention. Your presence becomes a steadying force in a world that's constantly in motion. It's also where joy becomes simpler and more profound. The sound of birds in the morning, the quiet cup of tea, the laughter of someone you love, the feeling of a gentle breeze, these aren't just background moments anymore. They are life itself. Slowing down doesn't strip away meaning. It reveals it. This rhythm of grace is not about doing nothing. It's about doing the right things with the right heart. It's about measuring life not by how fast you move, but by how aligned you are with what matters most. And in this alignment, you find peace, not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer chasing the illusion of perfection. You are simply being, fully, freely, finally. And that is where the truest version of you begins to shine. This is the season where discernment deepens. When you've crossed the threshold into your 60s, something shifts, not just physically, but spiritually and emotionally. Your vision becomes more refined. You start to see life not through the lens of urgency or ambition, but through the clarity of purpose and peace. You no longer chase after every opportunity, every invitation, or every opinion. Instead, you begin to evaluate everything through a different filter. Is this aligned with who I am now? Is this feeding my soul or draining it? Is this essential to the life I want to live? Discernment is the ability to separate noise from truth, urgency from importance, and distraction from destiny. It's a maturity of the soul that doesn't happen overnight. It's cultivated through years of experience, of successes and failures, of moments when you acted too quickly and times when you waited too long. And now that internal compass is stronger than it's ever been. You trust your instincts more. You listen less to the loud voices around you and more to the still, small voice within. You recognize the difference between people who want your attention and those who value your wisdom. At this stage of life, discernment often shows up as a quiet refusal. You say no without guilt. You walk away without explaining. You protect your peace without needing approval. That's not pride, it's clarity. You've lived enough to know what drains your spirit and what nourishes it. You no longer need to explain every decision, defend every boundary, or justify every choice. You understand that peace is not just a feeling, it's a priority. And it's something you are now willing to guard with your life. Discernment also reveals itself in your relationships. You begin to see people more clearly, not with judgment, but with understanding. You recognize who is genuinely growing and who is simply performing. You spot manipulation, shallow praise, and hidden agendas more quickly. But you also recognize authenticity, humility, and kindness. You begin to draw closer to people who are rooted, grounded, and intentional. Those who match your frequency, not just your history. You also become more selective with your time. Discernment helps you realize that just because something is a good opportunity doesn't mean it's a God opportunity. Not every open door is meant to be walked through. Not every invitation is meant to be accepted. You stop living reactively and start living reflectively. You take time to ask, will this cost me more than it's worth? Will this bring me closer to my values, my calling, and my peace? If not, you let it pass, and that too is strength. This depth of discernment leads to a quieter, more powerful kind of influence. You're not trying to convince anyone of anything. You're not campaigning for validation. Your life speaks for itself. Through your actions, your consistency, and your presence, the people who matter will notice your depth. They'll be drawn not to your performance, but to your peace, not to your platform, but to your presence. And perhaps the most powerful fruit of discernment is this: you no longer fear missing out. You know that everything meant for you will find you in its time. You don't rush, you don't cling. You release what isn't yours and trust that what is meant for you will remain. That confidence brings an ease that cannot be faked. It frees you from comparison and compromise. You understand now that discernment is not about having all the answers. It's about asking better questions and trusting yourself to wait for the right answers to come. It's about living with depth, not surface noise, meaning not movement, alignment not applause. And in that space, you find a wisdom that guides you gently, steadily, and surely through this sacred chapter of your life.